Is traveling with EF Ultimate Break worth it? This video is going to be all about everything to do with EF Ultimate Break, everything that I've learned from going on 2 different EF Ultimate Break trips. Is it worth it? The big question, because EF Ultimate Break does have some pricey numbers on there. So let's just start off with, what is EF Ultimate Break? It is a group travel organizations for people age 18 through 35. You can either go alone or with friends. It is geared towards a younger audience just in terms of activities and how packed the itinerary is. So it is aimed for more of that 18 to 35-year-old group. There are so many options. There are over 120 trips to 6 continents and 65 different trips all over the world of various types. What does going on an EF Ultimate Break trip include? So really everything. You could book a trip and not plan a single thing. It includes flights, all in-country transportation, accommodations, itinerary, any planning necessary, including all breakfasts, a handful of lunches and dinners, including a welcome dinner and a farewell dinner on the first and last nights of the trip. The biggest perk, honestly, of EF Ultimate Break is you don't have to plan a single thing. You can book the trip and just show up, which I've definitely done. So I've done 2 different EF trips now. I went on the Ecuador and the Galapagos Islands trip last summer, and then I just came back from the Belize Reefs, Rainforests, and Ruins trip, which I did in April. And so I will link all of those videos down below, so if you are interested in any of my EF Ultimate Break travel vlogs, you can see all of that stuff. There are 2 main different types of trips that you can go on. They're the Essential and the Plus trips. So Essential are more of like the backpacker style trips. You stay in hostels or smaller kind of accommodation, whereas the Plus trips are you're staying in nicer style rooms, you only have 1 roommate. But even if you are traveling on an essential trip, you can still book additionally through EF. You can book to like just stay in a private room or just with 1 other person. So if you are going on an EF trip with your partner, then you can just sign up to only have those 2 people in a room. So even if you are on an essentials trip, you can still only have 1 roommate or a private room if you want. There are also trips geared more towards people who are traveling alone or solo travel. They also have a lot of city experience trips, which are basically you go to 1 city and you spend usually about a week there and you really get the full experience of the city. They also have more budget-friendly ones, and then some very high-end ones like the Hemisphere Hopper that they actually just released not that long ago. That one is definitely one of the more expensive ones, but it's also a really long, 2-month-long, really cool North to South America trip. So you really have the full range of options. As far as is EF Ultimate Break worth it, as someone who has traveled a lot to a lot of different places, especially in Europe, I personally would not go on any of the Europe trips just because Europe is a very accessible and easy to navigate continent in general, and I really feel very comfortable traveling Europe either by myself or with friends, and the extra money for somebody else to plan that trip would not really be worth it for me unless the trip offered a very specific experience, like the Cruise Croatia trip that I'm very interested in, and there's been a lot of hype around that trip because again, it's a cruise experience rather than just, touring on a bus through the country, that kind of thing, or like some of the other holiday trips that they have offered. So again, I personally wouldn't choose Europe trips for EF. I would honestly do those on my own. I would save EF trips for countries that are a little bit more difficult or harder to navigate. I know Egypt is one that I really want to do through EF, largely just because it is a bit of a more difficult country to navigate on your own and a lot more things to plan. And I know for the Egypt trip, EF makes sure that there is a bodyguard for the trip that stays with them the whole time. So that's one of those things that you'd be really kind of hard to plan on your own. Other countries such as the Ecuador and the Belize trip that I went on in Central and South America, those trips are also ones that just harder to plan public transportation for, and also feel safe in. Those ones would just take more planning in general. So that's why I chose to go on those 2 trips. However, if you are new to traveling, or if you haven't really been to Europe or traveled internationally much at all, or you just really like the group travel format, then of course the Europe trips are for sure just going to be just as fun as any other trip. It's just something that I personally don't think I would spend my money on, because a lot of what you are paying for is also the ease of not having to plan your trip at all. A great way to save money is to wait for one of EF's semi-annual sales, or they just have a lot of sales in general, or the Black Friday sale. That's a huge one in which a lot of their trips are up to $1,000 off or more, including some of their most popular trips. So I would definitely make sure to wait until there's a sale, because there will be at some point a sale for the trip you want to go on. You can also save money by checking the dates available for a certain trip, because the prices can actually change quite significantly between the same trip that's going just a week earlier or a week later. And you can see all the prices for all the different dates for the same trip all listed out. So if you have a little bit of freedom in which dates you go on, not everybody has that opportunity, but if you do, definitely check out to see if there is dates for the trip you want that are a little cheaper than a different date, because that will also could save you hundreds of dollars. Sometimes the difference between those dates can be a couple hundred up to $1,000 different sometimes, and that really has nothing to do with the experience. It's really more things on the back end, like when things are popular to go to, the price of flights at that time, what's available at that time. It just means if it's easier or harder to get. So the actual experience of the trip won't be any different. It's just things that they have to do more or less on the back end. You can also use my code UASarahN100 plus the link in the description below for an additional $100 off any sale that's going on. You can tack this code onto it as well, so that's additional $100 off. Even if you already booked your trip, you can actually still call EF and be like, hey, can you please apply this code to my account? And they will. So even if you've already booked your trip, don't worry, you can still apply the code. And also, I know sometimes EF is a little tricky when you go to check out, like when you're actually booking a trip. Sometimes they don't always make it very easy to notice where you can put that discount code in. So if you don't see anything, don't worry. After you book, you can just call EF and they will apply that code. Another nice thing about EF Ultimate Break is that you don't have to pay the whole thing at once. So you can set up a payment plan. That is usually what I do. So it deposits every month, just depending on how long there is left until the trip. Or you can actually manually go in and pay in smaller amounts, however much you want to, however often you want to, which makes it much more manageable as well, because I know I hate seeing such a large amount of money go out of my bank account at once. That's a little stressful for me, so I definitely take advantage of that payment plan. I don't even have to think about it. It will just automatically take out of my bank account, and by the time I get on the trip, it's like it was free, because I haven't thought about it in so long. Now that you've booked the trip and the dates, what about flights? So you can actually book the trip with or without flights, and depending on the trip, they could be more expensive or less expensive than what booking your own flights actually would cost. Just know that if you do book your own flights, you will be responsible for the transportation to and from the airport, unless you happen to be coming in at the same time that the flights that EF booked are coming in, because the tour guide does pick you up on the bus from the airport if you booked through EF with your flights. But a lot of people do end up coming through when the bus is already there waiting for people, so that's another factor to consider. I will say I have looked at a bunch of different trips over the years and just like compared with and without flights, and there are times when it's definitely worth it to book with EF, and there are some times where the flights seem to add a significant portion to the price, which yes, obviously flights are expensive in general, but like I do a little quick search on Google Flights and it seems like I would be able to book my own flights for much cheaper than what EF has. So I would just compare, do a little quick Google Flights search, see if the flights for your dates to your location are cheaper on your own, and also just whether or not you actually want to put in the effort to book your flights, because again, that's part of the ease of EF, is that they will book your flights for you, which is oftentimes my most stressful part of booking any trip. However, if you want a nonstop flight or one with the least amount of layovers, I would definitely book your flights by yourself. EF has some deals with various airplane partners, but they usually still choose the cheapest option. So your flights will often have like at least one layover, usually two, depends how far you are going. But if you are a nonstop girly, you want to not have any layovers, you probably want to book your flight yourself. Also, you want to make sure to download the EF Ultimate Break app, because that is where their group chat is with all of the people who are also going on this trip. You can ask your tour guide any questions, and there's a whole lot of information in there. It's also where you get your Know Before You Go guide, which is basically a massive document of anything you possibly want to know about where you're going, tipping, money, currency, what to pack, language, food, everything you possibly want to know. It is in that Know Before You Go guide. So that is another important thing about getting that EF app. In terms of packing, there are a few differences. If you book a essential trip, you probably won't have a check bag included, but like my Ecuador was a plus trip, so I did have a check bag included, but not on my Belize trip, which was an essential trip, so more of a backpacking style trip. Either way, I would recommend packing as light as possible, because you really don't want to be lugging around your suitcase in uncomfortable places, especially in Europe. You don't want to be dragging a suitcase over cobblestone. You just really don't. It's not a fun experience. Nobody's ever enjoyed that. So you should also make sure to watch my How to Pack for an EF Ultimate Break Trip, which I posted a few weeks ago before I went to Belize, for more details about packing for an EF trip, and just I got into a lot of details about specifics and what's included and what you should bring, and everything you want to bring for an EF Ultimate Break trip I included in that video, so you should watch that for more specifics on packing. You also just want to make sure you are aware of what's included in an EF Ultimate Break trip. Besides activities, all breakfasts are always included, and depending on the trip, a certain number of lunches and dinners are included. You do get a welcome dinner on the first night and a farewell dinner on the last night. Those are always included, and you usually have some collection of dinners and lunches included already, but just know that they're not all included and you will have to go buy some additional ones yourself. But the tour guides do try to be very good at planning meals for everyone, especially if you are traveling from one city to another and you're kind of in the middle of nowhere during a meal time. They're usually very good at planning a lunch spot or a dinner spot, and you maybe have to pay like $10 for like a base meal. So it's not like you're going to a restaurant and ordering. There's like a pre-planned meal for everybody, and you just have to pay maybe $10 for it. But that is a very nice thing that the tour guides make sure to include, because there are some times when you're in the middle of nowhere and you just need a meal, but it's not available for you to find on your own. So they do make sure that you will have food. It's just sometimes you also need to pay a little bit more at the time in local currency for it. The tour guides also plan a lot of additional activities for when you have free time. They will plan all these things that are not included in the original EF itinerary that you can then choose to pay for, again, in local currency directly to the tour guide. And the thing is, not everybody will go on these. They're not required at all, because it's when you normally have free time. However, some of these additional activities might not actually go unless a certain number of people are signed up to do them. So just be aware of that. It might fluctuate with how those extra activities will be planned, but I will say usually the prices are very reasonable. For my Belize trip, we had 3 different separate free day activities, all for I think $150 a person, and there were many things included on that. We had an extra day of snorkeling. We got to tour a place where they make traditional Mayan chocolate. We got to help make the chocolate. We got a traditional drumming lesson on the beach. There were some included meals in all of that. So there's a lot of things that are included in those activities that your tour guide plans. You definitely don't have to participate in these. It is nice to see what a local thinks are the best things to experience in their country, because those things might be more out of the beaten path, or you may not think to experience in the first place if it wasn't somebody who knows the country who's showing them to you. And honestly, those extra activities that tour guide planned in Belize, for example, those things all turned out to be some of our favorite things to do. The snorkeling, the drumming lesson, the chocolate factory, that was some of the best things we saw. Were super fun. And then in Ecuador, some of our extra things were like zip lining and going to a waterfall on a hike, and we visited a tribe in the Amazon rainforest, which was a super cool experience that we definitely would not have gotten, or like wouldn't really have been able to plan on our own very well, especially in such a large group. So definitely think those extra activities are something unique that the tour guide is able to provide, and it's just one more thing that you get to include in your trip. Another huge perk of EF Ultimate Break and group travel in general is that you don't have to worry about getting the trip out of the group chat, because you can go solo. Both of my trips that I went on EF Ultimate Break were alone. I didn't go with anybody. I didn't have anybody to go with. So I just went by myself, and I made great friends. I've even traveled to see some of my friends that I met through my Ecuador trip. Most people go on EF trips alone. There are some people who go with their friends, or some people who go, like a couple will go together, but most people go alone. So everyone's very willing to hang out and make friends, and there's a little bit of everybody. So depending on what you want to do, if you want to party a lot, if you want to do all the adventurous things, or if you want to do more of a chill approach and lounge a little bit more, there's definitely some of everybody on every trip. So you will for sure find people who want to do the things you want to do. There's everybody on every trip. So overall, yes, EF is for sure worth it, for the ease of not having to plan a trip at all, to having automatic friends go on it, to making certain countries way more accessible that might otherwise be more difficult to visit. And yes, some of those prices can look a little bit high, but remember, you are paying for the ease of not having to book anything yourself. But also remember that you can always use code UASarahN100 and the link into my description for $100 off your first trip with EF Ultimate Break. And you can apply that code after you've already booked. Just call EF up and tell them you have a code you want to apply to your account. Again, I probably wouldn't find it worth it to book a trip to Europe with EF Ultimate Break, just because I have traveled a lot to Europe and I'm very used to getting around Europe. And in general, Europe is very easy to navigate, unless they had some kind of special experience going with it. So maybe you'll see me on a Cruise Croatia trip sometime soon, because I for sure want to go on that. But all in all, I definitely love EF Ultimate Break. It is such an easy way to book travel and get more travel experience in to so many different countries. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and like the video, and I will see you all in the next one.